All right, welcome. In this video, I'm going to show you how to create a new project inside of Solution from the CLI and get it set up to be hosted on Azure and deployed automatically through GitHub Actions whenever we push new changes to the master branch. Here we go. So we're going to start off in the terminal and we're going to create, so let's make this like closer to a real world kind of scenario where we're going to have a solution with several projects inside of it, right? So let's say our main product for our startup is a web app running Razor pages, but we also need some sort of CLI tool, so a console app for admin stuff. And of course, we want to test our application, so we'll need a test project, right? So let's try and set that up all from the command line. So what we want first is to create, there's several ways to go about this, but since I know we're making a project or a whole solution with several projects inside it, I'm just gonna make a new directory, and let's call our project Phoenix. Let's call it Phoenix. Yeah. So, all right, and we'll cd into that, and good. Now we'll create our solution. So .new solution, or I think you can just do SLN, and let's see, I think we can just pass the name. So actually, you don't even need to put to pass in anything. It'll take the containing folder's name as the solution name. So if we do this. Yes, so we've got our solution file inside of our Phoenix folder. At this point, though, that's pretty much all that we have. Let's add a new, let's start with our Razor app. So Razor, we'll call it Phoenix Web. Okay, and there it is. And let's add a console application. Yep, Phoenix console. And there it is. And let's what are we missing? Oh, test unit tests with X unit. Okay. Okay, so we've got our three projects here, but if we look at, actually, let's do this, right? So if we look at our solution file, we can see that it's pretty much empty. So when creating projects from the command line like this, they won't automatically get added to your solution. You need to do it manually. And the way to do this is .net SLN add. And okay, here we go. Yeah, Phoenix test. Let's add that one. And then we can let's go with Phoenix Web. I wonder if, yeah, okay, let's see if that'll work. Yep, okay. Okay, so here's a little gotcha. We got to be careful with this. See how it added the, actually, let me open it again. So if we look at this here, it used lowercase because that's what I typed in. And I believe on Windows machines this will be fine, but it might create problems on Linux machines. I think I've had problems with this before. So that's one thing we're gonna have to be careful about. I'll probably just fix that in a second. Which one were we missing? We're missing the console one. So .net SLN add Phoenix console. So it's better to do it that way. Okay. So now we've got our projects, we've got our solution. We're going to go inside of Visual Studio Code for the rest to fix that solution file for starters, but also from there we're going to push our project to a new repository on GitHub, and it's a really easy way to do it
inside of VS Code, though there's like tons of different ways to do it. But first, before we do that, actually, let me show you how to do another really useful thing with the .NET CLI. Sorry, you can create a editor config file, which personally I kind of like to do. It's got all the defaults that are related to .NET solutions and projects. And as well, since we're going to be creating a new repository with Git source control, you can do new, what's it called again? Git ignore, yeah, Git ignore. And now we're in pretty good shape. So let's do code period to open our folder in Visual Studio Code, and there we have it. We've got our git ignore, editor config. Here's our Phoenix solution. I'm going to just fix that path naming here to get my capital W, just to make sure we don't get any issues with that. Okay. We don't need this to be open. So what we're going to do, our next step is setting up source control, right? So we go to source control on the left panel here. It's going to tell us, well, we don't have source control set up. Do we want to initialize a repository? Yeah, we do. But on top of that, we'd like it to be tied to, or to live on GitHub. So there's a convenient button here, publish to GitHub, which will do both for us. So initialize the repo and push it to GitHub. So let's make this public. There we go. It's creating our first commit for us automatically, and it's publishing the branch, uploading all of that, and we're done. We can even open directly on GitHub. And here's our Phoenix repo available on GitHub. Great. The next step is to set up hosting with Azure. So we're going to go to our Azure portal. Obviously, as a prerequisite, you need to have an account and all your stuff set up with Azure. Once you have that, you can go to, let's see, App Services and create. Okay. So subscription, I'm going to keep the pay-as-you-go. Resource group, we're going to create a new one. I will call this Phoenix, I guess. Phoenix RG for a resource group. Okay. Our web app name, let's call this Phoenix. And just because, yeah, it's already taken, right? Because the name is also, that's part of our Azure website's URL. Let's call this Phoenix 23. Yeah, we're good. Publish is going to be code. Runtime stack is going to be .NET 7. That's what I've got set up at the moment. We're going to use Linux as the operating system. It's looking for a region right now that would fit what we need, I guess. Probably going to end up with US East. That's usually the one that it selects for me. Yep, East US, good. Linux plan, it's going to create a new one with a kind of a randomly generated name. That's fine. Our pricing plan, I'm going to keep that on free. And at this point, we could do next and set up a bunch of other things. But since this is just a demo and I'm using the free plan, so a lot of those options wouldn't be available anyways, we can just skip ahead to review, create. Okay, and create. We just need to wait while it's creating our deployment. Obviously, you'd probably, in the real app, you'd probably have a need for a database. So there would be a few more things to set up in Azure. But this, what I'm showing you right now, is enough to get you started and get something hosted and actually get a web application going. While this is, okay, that was pretty fast actually. So let's go to resource. And we've got our web application here. And this is our URL. So we could try to navigate there, though the app just started, so it's probably going to
take a little while. So while it's doing this, let's just go back to our command line and confirm that all of this is working, right? I've just created all these projects and repo and all that, but is this all working? So if we do .NET run, and yeah, let's confirm that our web app is working. Just to be okay. And in the background, you can see that our page has loaded, the one on Azure. But let's just wait a second for this to, okay, there we go, and we can load. Okay, so right, our Razor page web app is working, phoenix.web. That's locally here. Now let's see what's happening on Azure. So as we can see, it's just showing us kind of this generic thing. Your web app is running and waiting for your content, right? Because though we've created the environment on Azure to receive, to host our code, we haven't transmitted anything to Azure. So that's the next step, right? Once we've confirmed, and actually let's do the other one just so that you know that everything works properly locally. So our web app works fine. Let's try our console, which is just Phoenix console. By default, I think it just prints, yeah, hello world. And finally, we also have a test project. So let's do .NET test. And I think by default, there's just like one bogus test and it should be passing. So yeah, one test file and one pass. Great. Okay. So now we know that everything works locally. No reason to think that this wouldn't work, that our web app anyways wouldn't work on Azure as well. Okay, how do we set that up so that we can get our app to be deployed automatically to Azure every time we push a change to the main or master branch? Actually, Azure makes that really easy for us. So we can go to deployment center, and depending on the plan that you select when you create the app, you might even be able to set that up on app creation. But if you didn't, no worries, you can do this afterwards like we're doing right now by going to the deployment center. All right, so the source will be GitHub. And this is really cool, right? So I'm already signed in here. If that's not your case, you would sign into GitHub at this point. You could sign into a different account if you wanted to. I've got my personal account. You can choose the organization, Snowfrog Dev. That's my personal account. Now it's going to load up my repository. I could try to search the drop down, but I've got way too many of them. So I'm just going to use the search feature for Phoenix. There it is. And I only have the master branch, so that's the one we're going to bind to. And that's really all we need to do. We press save. And at this point, Azure is going to create a new GitHub action file and actually install it on our repo. It's going to make a commit for us. And we should be, let's refresh. We should be seeing that. Yeah, here we go. So we can see the last commit, right? Add or update the Azure App Service build and deployment workflow. If we look here, we've got this new file. And everything's all set up for you. It's pretty well done, right? On push to master branch, what happens? Well, we build, we publish, we upload, we deploy. That's basically what, of course, you can add more stuff to it, but this is all we need to get started. And actually, since this is a push, right? This commit is actually a push to master branch. Our action should be running at the moment. Oh, actually, we see that it failed. And actually, that's going to give me the opportunity to highlight one of the gotchas that you want to look for, especially if you're not familiar or not very familiar with .NET projects. And yeah, here we go. The publish step failed. Why did the publish step fail? Well, it's telling us, and this is a rather new error, so you might have never seen that before. You're going to start seeing it. It's a new thing that came out over the last few days, and we're in mid-February 2023. So with, I think, .NET 7.0.2 and up, they no longer allow using the output flag when building a solution. That's what this is, right? The output option isn't supported when building a solution. And that, it's a good thing actually, because this clues us into one problem that we have. The GitHub action file that Azure set up builds the solution. In our solution, we have a test project, we have a console app, and we have a web app. We don't want to build and deploy all of that to Azure. We just want to deploy the web app, right? So the GitHub action file that Azure produces, it will work out of the box if what you have is just one project at the root level of your repository. Then that would work. But if you have a solution with several projects, you want to be careful. You'll have to go and change some things in there. And let's do it from our Visual Studio Code. And we should be able to pull in the change with the GitHub action file. Yep, here we go. And what we're going to do is change. So I guess not only the publish, it failed on the publish, but we might as well change the build as well. So we'll build, which one is it? It's the web, right. So Phoenix dot, and we can do the same thing here. And now this change should fix the error we're getting in the GitHub action. We could have changed it right in GitHub, but change, let's see. I will say only build the web app. Push that change, and now should trigger a new run. There we go. Might as well watch what's going on live. Let's go in there. So that's actually a problem I've run into in the past. And it wasn't quite as obvious because before we wouldn't get that error. So it would just build the whole solution and it would deploy the whole solution to Azure, and then it wouldn't work as expected. And it was kind of hard to figure out why. Okay, so our build step has gone through. So we fixed that .NET publish error we were getting. Now it's actually deploying to Azure Web App. Here we go. Yep, we're done. Now it might take a second or two because it received our code, but it's starting up the app. But let's see. Let's hit refresh on our page here. Here we go. Successful. Not bad, right? Took us about 20 minutes to get this up and running. Now let me show you one other thing that tripped me up. And it might happen to you too. So it's a good thing to know. Let's say, right, our app right now in our solution is rather simple. Let's make it a little bit more complex. Let's, obviously your web app would probably depend on other projects and packages, right? It would have dependencies that would need to be built and all that stuff. So to kind of emulate that, let's just get the web application, the web project, to depend on the console app. We could pretend that there's some classes in there that we want to reuse or something. And then, whoa, look at that. That's GitHub Copilot. It's trying to help me. I'm not interested in package references. I'm interested in project references. So you got that right. Let's add a project. What is it? Keep forgetting this part. Yeah, project, I believe. No.
Let's see if GitHub Copilot can help us. Depend on console project. Project reference, yeah. I don't know why it wasn't suggesting it before. There we go. And yeah, even got the path and everything for us in there. That's great. Thank you, Copilot. And I think that's all we need, so okay. Actually, let's just to satisfy our sense that everything is working the way it should, let's do .NET run. And let's run our web app project. We want to make sure this didn't break anything. There's no reason that it would have. We didn't change the code. We're just changing the, really like the build, the assembly dependency. But in the build here, we should probably see that it's also building the console app as it's getting things ready. Oh, I guess they don't see it when we're building. They don't show it. But maybe we can get .NET build, and we're building the web app. So Phoenix web. This should give us a terminal output. Yeah, okay, so here you go. So now it's also building the console app as well as the web one when we try to build the web one. That's just what I wanted to highlight. Let's do a commit. And we're going to say web depends on console. Push that to GitHub, which should trigger our action. Let's go see. Let's kick off the whole chain. Yep, already started. Have to wait a few seconds. And this is worth knowing because it's a pretty benign problem, what I'm about to show you, but it's not immediately obvious, and it's not necessarily easy to find the solution when you're not, when this never happened to you before. And it's, okay, so that was pretty quick. Now it's deploying. So hopefully this will be one more resource out there with the solution to that problem, because when researching this, wasn't necessarily easy to find. And okay, here we go. So our code is deployed. Let's give it a second or two for the app to start and hit refresh. Right, and this is what I expected. This is exactly what I expected. So why isn't it working anymore, right? Everything built properly, everything was deployed properly. We didn't change any code at all. The only thing we did is we said, we'd like the web app to also depend on the console project. What's the problem with that? Well, let me show you. And this will be at the same time a way to show a possible, a means to kind of debug problems you might have with your Azure App Service. So we're going to go to log stream, if I can remember what, there it is, under monitoring. So in log stream, we should see the app start basically, right? If we scroll up enough, and here it is, right? Application started. But we see, this is what I'm looking for, right? Warning, found files, Phoenix console runtime config, and phoenix.web runtime config. To fix this issue, you can set the startup command to point to a particular startup file. In other words, Azure doesn't know which application it's supposed to start. Because we're depending on the console app is an executable. And that's why it's producing this runtime config file, and that's why Azure is all confused. We're only using that project for maybe just a class or two in there. We're not actually running the executable, but Azure doesn't know that, so it's confused. And it's giving us the means to fix the problem.
right? Where was it? Here. I think the logs shifted. Did we lose it? Here it is. Okay. For example, .NET and then pass in a DLL. So the startup command, how do we set that up? Well, we go to configuration settings, configuration. There we go. And in the general settings tab, there's startup command. And it's empty right now because normally, if all you have is the one executable app, it'll know that it needs to start that. But in this case, we're going to help it along, and we'll say .NET, and what's the name of our Phoenix? Phoenix.web.dll, right? Hit save, continue. It's updating the web app settings, which will kick off a restart of the application. Well, maybe not restart, but a start. And let's see if we can refresh. Not yet. Sometimes there's a bit of caching. Oh, there you go. Okay. So we're done. Just wanted to show how it can be relatively easy to set up a web app to be deployed automatically through GitHub Actions on Azure. Naturally, the complexity increases if you have to set up a database service and maybe some messaging and things like that. But really, the base of it can be relatively easy.